Hi, this is Cathy. Today I'm going to be talking about the astrology of 2026, and boy, what a year we have in store for us. You may recall that in 2025, all of the outer planets for the first time were in fire and air signs. Things began shifting really rapidly. Then Uranus and Neptune and Saturn all moved back into Earth and water. Things slowed down a little bit. They retrograded. But finally, in 2026, they're all moving back again, and things are really going to be speeding up. There's some electric, a little bit heavy energy coming up for us this year. And so being prepared for the ups and downs and quick shifts in our environment, finding that meditative space is what I'm doing. And I invite you to as well, because as things move rapidly, finding our own center in the middle of it can be really helpful. So I will go over, I think there's 11 big transits that I saw that I wanted to cover. And so we'll talk about that. First, I'm going to show you a little visual that I think will help us all get the big picture of what's happening for the year. One second, I just want to make that a little bigger. Because, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I just made this little slide. You could even print it out. I'll drop a link below to a place where you can print out a PDF of this presentation. It's got some key dates in it that might be helpful for you. You can post this little picture on the wall. I'm going to do that. And so this is just, first I'll start out with the big picture, 5-minute explanation of the shifting energy over the course of the year. Of course, this is not every transit that's happening. There's a lot of transits in the background that will happen each month and will shift the energy for all of us, but these are the big ones. So we start out in January, and it's a moment, you see there I have an image of somebody kind of meditating. The energy in January with Mercury, the god of communication, and Mars, the god of war, and Venus, the goddess of love and relationship, they're all under the beams of the sun. That means they're very close to the sun during this time period in January. And when that happens with planets, you can't see them in the sky because the sun's beams block them. And so there's an internal quality to the energy in January. At the same time, they're all one at a time when they enter Aquarius in later in January, are going to be hitting Pluto, who's at early degrees of Aquarius. Pluto is the god of the underworld, Hades, and he asks us to bring things up to process that may have been hidden. So this is how, for me, I have a sense that the energy this month is going to be about processing, things stirring underground, that Plutonian energy, and then everything emerges after that with the other shifts in the transits that we see. In February, I have a little snowman who looks really sad, and he's melting. And this is my image for the Saturn Neptune conjunction that's going to perfect for the first time on February 20th of 2026 in Aries. Saturn and Neptune, when they have been dancing together in the sky for the last year, in and out of Aries and Pisces, and Saturn's about boundaries and restrictions and responsibility and structures. And Neptune is a planet of dreaminess and can bring a little bit of confusion and fantasy. When Saturn and Neptune are in the sky, we might have structures melting in our lives. It's kind of the signature of Russia. If you think about the zeitgeist or the way Russians have a little bit of a heaviness, there's a heavy quality sometimes to our thinking when Saturn and Neptune are together. We'll talk about that. And then as we move into March, we get the first eclipse season. I'll go through that. That's the yin yang symbol there. And then you see above that a woman, she's like confused, and then gets some clarity. We get the Mercury retrograde cycle, which has always some confusion that can come up with it. And then after the Mercury goes direct, we get a little bit of clarity. Then if you look down at April, you'll see a little verbal sign of people fighting. There's a really big kind of difficult signature that's happening April 19th to 20th, when Mars and Saturn and Mercury all conjoin in the sky in Aries. I'll talk about that. It's a moment where we may need to watch our words, or there may be a tendency to get in conflict with other people. In May, we have Uranus moving into Gemini for good for the next 7 years. Gemini is an air sign that's about communication and technology. Uranus is a sign of liberation and sudden insight. It's a kind of frenetic energy. When we move into June, we get really the most lovely period of the year in many ways, where Jupiter and Venus are both in Cancer. And Jupiter's been there for a while. He's exalted in Cancer. He likes to grow things and help them blossom. And when the goddess of love, the other benefic planet, joins him, it's a little bit of a party. So this is a great time of year for, creating safe spaces to have fun with friends and to connect. And then when we move into July, we have the nodes of the moon are shifting from Virgo and Pisces, where they've been for about a year and a half, into Leo and Aquarius. We'll talk about that. Also, at this moment, we have a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini. This is big in some ways for the United States because Mars and Uranus are in Gemini in the US chart, and it can bring sudden events, sometimes accidents. Of course, with all of these transits, they're not necessarily going to hit you personally. It really depends on your chart. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then in August, we have the second eclipse season. September to December is this Venus, Mercury energy, some Scorpio depth, because Venus and Mercury are both going retrograde in Scorpio. Their retrograde periods coincide, and they're going to be at the apex of a T-square between Mars and Pluto. Mars, the god of war, and Pluto, the god of the underworld, are going to be opposing each other. And Venus and Mercury are going to come in there and be affected by that. A T-square is this really potent energy. We'll unpack that a little bit. Talk about what you might do to resolve if you're going through a relationship review, Venus retrograde, and Mercury retrograde, communications, reviewing communications in that time period when the energy is so intense with that T-square. And lastly, at the very end of the year, we get Mars-Uranus square. And that replicates that lightning strike energy we saw in July when there was the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So, as you can see, a lot to talk about. We'll take it step by step. This is a nice visual for you if you want the dates. Again, you can print this out of what the turning points will be this year. And as always, if anybody ever wants to have a personal contact, I do astrology readings. So if you want to go through some of these in your own chart and have me identify which of these might be most potent for you this year, I'm certainly happy to do that. The way you tell which transits are going to be most potent for you is you see if they fall at a degree that's near a planet in your birth chart, particularly personal planets like the moon. Oh my Lord. Oh, for a second, I thought I wasn't recording. Kind of freaked me out, but I'm recording. Anyway, if the transits are hitting your personal planets, the moon, sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, to a lesser extent, Jupiter and Saturn, and those ones might affect you more. And also there's some other ways to see if they might impact you depending on what your rising sign is. So then let's talk about the first of the major transits. We're not going to talk about everything I did in the overview because there's so much, but we'll talk about 11 different major transits. I think it's 11. So the first one to discuss is on February 17th, we have our first solar eclipse. It's the beginning of eclipse season. Usually we begin to feel the impacts of the eclipse sometimes a little bit before and a little bit after the season. Eclipses always unfold over a period of time, though. A solar eclipse marks the beginning of a new cycle. If you look here, I'm not sure if you can see it. Give me 1 second to see if I can bring up the, oh, forget I said that. So if you look at the chart on the left, it's kind of tiny, but solar eclipses happen when the sun and the moon are conjunct, meaning they're right next to each other in the sky. and within 15 degrees of one of the nodes of the moon. Those are the little horseshoes that you see in a chart. And so a solar eclipse can mark the start of a new cycle. Solar eclipses tend to have to do with shifts in how we think, because the sun has more to do with our consciousness, with spirit, let's say. Lunar eclipses have to do with the material world and can have to do with things like literal things disappearing or appearing in our lives, because the moon is our body, right? It's that rock in the sky that carries the light of the sun. And so with all eclipses, it can be about things suddenly appearing or disappearing in whatever area of our life the eclipse falls, whatever topic area, whatever houses represent the topic areas of our life. So if you have an eclipse, for example, in the first house of who you are, or that falls along the first and seventh house axis. The first house is who I am, seventh house is one-on-one partnerships. If you have eclipses along that axis, if you're an Aquarius or a Leo rising, that's where this eclipse would fall. You might find sudden people appearing in your life who might be one-on-one relationships. You can also find sometimes that relationships adjust, or you let go of things in the relationship that no longer suit the relationship with an Aquarius eclipse in the first and seventh house. So that's just a little bit of a hint. I will be trying, God willing, to do videos about each of these major transits over the course of the year, take an even deeper dive. In any event, this solar eclipse is going to bring up questions. It falls in Aquarius 3, the third decan, or the last 10 degrees of the sign. Every 10 degrees of the zodiac is associated with the tarot card. There's also esoteric teachings associated with it, so we can get a deeper sense of what the meaning of this eclipse will be by looking at the tarot card. And here we see it's the Seven of Swords in the Rider-Waite deck. The energy and vibe of this part of the zodiac can have to do with when we've gotten into a situation that it's like a Gordian knot. It's confusing. It's, we're all mixed up in it, and we do not see a way out of it. And sometimes the only way out of a situation is to cut the Gordian knot, right? And to leave. And so there's a should I stay or should I go quality to this decan of the zodiac. And it can have to do with themes of ambivalence, the decision to make a strategic retreat in that part of our life, right? Also, and I'm going to pause there for a second to say I have a series on the decans of the zodiac. And if I'll drop a link, particularly to Aquarius 3. I haven't made it yet because we're not at that point in the decan walk, but I'll go back and reconnect it. But you can check out my other videos on the decans as well. I'll drop a link. In any event, this solar eclipse could also have to do with Aquarius topics in general. The Aquarius is a sign that relates to the collective. It's if the sign that's opposite Aquarius is Leo. And one of the ways to understand a sign is to understand the energy of the sign opposite, because it has an opposite quality. And Leo is a sign that's ruled by the sun. All the other planets revolve around the sun. I say this all the time. So Leo's about, hey, look at me, I'm the center, and I'm meant to inspire other people. Whereas Aquarius is an air sign ruled by Saturn, the god of restrictions and responsibility. It's got a leaden quality. Saturn's way out there, the furthest planet from the sun. So there's something about Aquarius energy that wants to detach and get the observer's standpoint, to not be the center, to decenter oneself, to work on behalf of community rather than the individual. A good example of this is Karl Marx, who wrote the Communist Manifesto, was an Aquarius rising, and he really it amplifies. Oh, I cannot think of the word. He's a really great example. exemplifies this energy. So yeah, we can think about that. At the bottom, lastly, I put that this is an annular eclipse, and that happens when the moon doesn't cover the sun altogether. And so for the eclipse, but it's right at the center. And so there's like a ring of fire on the outside. Eclipses can sometimes have to do with the rise and fall of leaders in countries. And with an annular eclipse, it's noted that instead of the leader maybe disappearing altogether, this symbolically is how they speak of it, that there may be a disempowerment of the leader or a partial change, but not the actual ending for that leader. So just to keep that in the background from a standpoint of mundane astrology, which is the astrology of countries and politics and whatnot. Yeah. So then, give me 1 second to find my little cursor. There we go. The next major transit after that is Saturn, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on February 20th. It's happening at 0 degrees Aries, the very beginning of the sign, in fact, the beginning of the entire zodiac. It's a important point because 0 Aries is the Aries ingress point, and historically mundane astrologers use it to do all kinds of predictive work. So there's just something that feels big about having the Saturn-Neptune conjunction fall on this point. So Saturn and Neptune, as I said earlier, have been dancing in the sky since early 2025. They were in Aries for a brief period of time in June, July, August, and came within a degree of perfecting the conjunction, meaning they got right next to each other, but then they retrograded and did not connect. And then they both retrograded back into Pisces, where they've been for a while, and now they're moving back into Aries, and they're finally going to connect. So what does this mean? Well, as I said earlier, Saturn is the planet of restrictions, boundaries, structures, things we build through hard work over a long period of time. Neptune is a planet that has to do with dreaminess, oneness with the universe, merging, confusion, fantasy, illusion. And so when you have Saturn and Neptune together, it's like Neptune kind of can melt the structures, can lead to confusion around what the ground is that's underneath us. This is a signature that I may have said earlier already, but it's prominent in the chart of Russia. And if you think about the energy or the heaviness of the thinking of Russia, and I say that because Saturn is a leaden planet. It's got a little bit of a heavy, depressive quality. It makes us serious. He's the god of death, for example. He brings endings. And so when we have Neptune and Saturn together, it can also make us feel a little sad. And that's why the snowman on the original image was sad. And this will begin to improve after Saturn separates from Neptune over the following months. But Saturn's going to be in Aries for 2.5 years still, co-present with Neptune. So this energy of a little bit of heaviness might be in the background for all of us. Just can be good to know that, to know also that it will move on, but this is a period that might be a little serious. And when these two planets come together, there might be a moment in the outer world where you see things dissolving. For example, they were together in early 2025, and in the United States, we had Doge come in and destroy all these structures of the internal organizing I'm trying to think. The governmental agencies got sort of decimated and people were fired and things were falling apart, right? And so we may see a renewal of some of that destruction or melting of structures. Yeah, and I've got some other notes up there. If you want to, again, I'm going to drop the slides for y'all so you can take a look at that and get the meaning. But I think it's interesting to look at the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions historically. In 1917, there was a conjunction in Leo. This was the moment of the Russian Revolution, fall of monarchies, World War I. Think of trench warfare. I'm not a huge war buff, but my husband kind of is. And I do know a bit about how really really horrific. And not that this is going to repeat. I got to say that right away. Just because we had that at that moment doesn't mean the same experience is going to happen now. But you can see in trench warfare the confusion, the ideas people had about how the war would work, and then what actually ended up happening, which was all these soldiers dying in this very slow, horrific, muddy, right? There's a lot of mud, is what I kind of remember, battle. And that feels very Saturn Neptune to me. That everybody was confused and they just went ahead, and it ended up millions and millions of people ended up dying. And then in 1952, 1953, the conjunction was in Libra. And this was the McCarthy hearings here in, excuse me, McCarthyism here in the United States. The hearings actually happened in 54. But all that period of time where people were paranoid and accusing each other of being communists, and people were ending up on blacklists, and, you know, really wonderful, amazing people, their lives ran into difficulties. I always think of Pete Seeger, who's one of my favorite singers. I know he was one of the many, many artists that was accused and suffered consequences as a result. And then in 1989, it was a very different story. This is when Saturn and Neptune came together in Capricorn, which is an earth sign that really is about structures. And Saturn's strong there, right? Because Saturn rules Capricorn. And this is the moment the Berlin Wall fell. So you see structures falling. From our perspective, that was a really great thing to have this government that was oppressive kind of fall apart. And so that gives you kind of a feeling and what it will be for us in the coming year or a couple of years as this Saturn Neptune energy together in Aries unfolds. We shall see. I should add one more point. One of the reasons it may be a little bit more difficult this time around is because the Saturn Neptune conjunction happens in Aries. Let me go back. And in Aries, Saturn's in its fall. Saturn does not do well. I made a video on the meaning of a planet in its fall in my planetary dignity series, and I'll drop a link to that for you as well. But in Aries, a fire sign that's ruled by Mars, Saturn doesn't have the tools that he needs to do what he does best, which is to exercise discipline and think about things a long time and make decisions from a standpoint of responsibility. And this is because there's a certain impulsivity to the Aries fire energy. So we may find that people act sort of irresponsibly around their Saturn energy, or maybe don't have the same maturity and thoughtfulness when they're taking action to impose restrictions or responsibility or on other people. So that's just something to think about in the background. And so then let's move on to the lunar eclipse, which happens on March 3rd at 12 degrees Virgo. Now, we've been going through eclipses in Virgo and Pisces for the last couple of years, and this is the last Virgo eclipse. Virgo is a sign about perfectionism, you could say. I mean, I don't want to boil it down to one thing. I have a lot of Virgo energy. One of the ways I describe Virgo is they want to make things, they can see the faults in the material world and they'd like to improve things. They want to make the material world beautiful and organized. And so, for example, with my Mercury in Virgo, my husband's a chef. He's an amazing cook, and he'll be cooking, and we both love to eat and food. I've got Jupiter in Taurus, so yeah. And so he'll be making an amazing recipe, and he's working really hard at it, and we have it for dinner that night. And I'm like, oh, you know, this is so good. But if you just added a little bit of oregano to this, it would be so much better. And it's not that I'm doing it to criticize him, which is just the reality. It's more like seeing something that can be improved and being so excited about the idea of making it better. And so understanding that with Virgo, of course, that Virgo energy can veer over into judgmentalism when the ego takes it over, right? And then it can be criticizing oneself or criticizing other people. But the more generous side of Virgo is about improvement. So Virgo topics are going to be activated by this eclipse. It's a south node eclipse and it's a lunar eclipse. South node is all about letting go of past karma, of letting go of old structures. So you may find that wherever Virgo falls in your chart, you let go of something, something literal, maybe. Because it's a lunar eclipse, so it could have to do with what you own or something disappearing or appearing in your life that's material. For me, I'm thinking this relates to we're getting ready to sell our house next spring and we're really in the middle of it. And so this eclipse energy is going to unfold right when we're letting go of our home. And our home is, anyway, I won't get all into the details, but you can think about it like that. It's not necessarily something bad. It's the right moment to let go of this thing in your life, and eclipses align us with our karma. If we're holding on to something past the time when we should, an eclipse may bring a point where we're like, oh yeah, I need to let go of that thing. I need to let go of that group or that friendship, or release the way in which I try and control the world. That's what Virgo can do too. Try and put things in order out of a sense of wanting to maintain control. So it's a great time to let go of control and move into that Pisces energy, which is much more open and expansive and is okay with things falling apart a little bit. It's a little bit more of an easygoing vibe. Yeah. So then let's move on to Mars Saturn. And I should not have such a huge smile on my face. I smile all the time because the Mars Saturn energy, not going to lie, this is going to be a little rough. Again, depending on where it falls in your chart, it might not affect you at all. But if you are a cardinal sign rising, meaning if your rising sign is Aries or Capricorn or Cancer or Libra, this eclipse, or excuse me, this conjunction of Mars and Saturn on April 19th, and then Mercury joins the party April 20th, may impact you more. Also, if you have points or inner planets on in or around 7 degrees of Aries, this might impact you. And I say this energy is a little bit more rough for a couple of reasons. First, Mars has the upper hand because Mars rules Aries, and Mars and Saturn are in Aries, and Mercury's there too. And so the god of war, our impulsive desire to get what we want, is going to have the upper hand. Saturn is in its fall in Aries. He's a little weak. And so our capacity to slow down and restrict or contain that Mars impulsive energy is impaired. So you can see moments where you may get enraged or upset about something with somebody in your life, and where you might typically hold back and restrain yourself and contain that energy and be more mature around it, Saturn, you may not be able to do that. And so, forgive yourself if you do act out, which is that psychological term for when things come up from our unconscious and we do the thing that we wish we hadn't done, or we say the thing we wish we hadn't said, because Mercury is going to be there with Mars and Saturn on the 20th. And so for me, I'm just going to note this on my calendar a few days before and a few days after, and understand that the energy of that time may be a moment to, double down on my meditation practice and or observe when anger is rising up in me and see if there's a way to contain it, or be deliberate and slow down around whatever I might impulsively want to talk about with other people. And so then after that, a few days after that, we have Uranus entering Gemini on April 25th, 2026. And so this is going to impact whatever sign in your chart, or excuse me, whatever house in your chart Gemini is. So if you're Gemini rising, it's going to be your first house of who you are that's going to be impacted by this shift of Uranus into Gemini, which is going to last for about 7 years. I'll talk about the meaning in a second. If you're a Sagittarius rising, this Uranus and Gemini energy is going to be in your seventh house of partnership. So you might find that you have, over the next 7 years of your life, sudden shifts and changes, and new people come into your life or leave your life around partnership, a desire to be free, and so on. And you can see the topic areas. I have a little slide with the topic areas for all the houses. The first house being about self, body, character, appearance. The second house being about how we bring money to ourselves, our sense of our values. The third house being about siblings and communication, but also the goddess energy. The moon has her joy there. So it's a real house that has to do with our what we learn through lived experience, that kitchen table wisdom, let's say, and so on. So you can look at this slide and get a sense for the different topic areas of each of the houses. And if you know where your rising sign is and you look at your chart, you can see where Gemini falls. You can get a feeling for those topic areas. Again, you can always reach out. We can do a reading on that. And you can, if you don't know your rising sign, I'll drop a link where you can pull your chart up on astroseek.com, and that'll help you out. So, big picture, what is Uranus in Gemini? The core themes have to do, well, let's just talk about Uranus. It's a planet that was discovered during the American and French Revolution. It has to do with revolutionary energy, a desire to break out of old structures. It's got a lightning bolt quality. It can be an aha moment, particularly if you have Uranus and Mercury together in your birth chart. You might be somebody who gets sudden insights of information because Mercury is about how we think, right? So Uranus, when it touches a planet in our chart, can bring a sudden desire to break free around the topic that planet rules in our chart. That's extra information that might be a little advanced. But in general, when we have Uranus transits to a house, it's going to bring shakeups. People who have Uranus in their birth chart in the fourth house might have moved multiple times suddenly in their life, like had lots of shifts. I have Uranus conjunct my midheaven, what I'm known for. Can have to do with career and reputation. And I'm an astrologer, and Uranus is a planet that's closely associated with astrology. I used to be a lawyer, and I suddenly left that job and started a new path, right? That's the Uranus energy. It's like, oh, aha, I want to do something else. I'm going to wake up and be something bigger. And so Uranus calls us to be our most authentic self. And it calls us to experiences that wake us up. So that is going to be the vibe. And in Gemini, it's an air sign that's the sign of the twins. It's a sign that has to do with communication and data. It's a fast, rapid sign to begin with because Mercury, the god of communication, which is a really fast planet, rules Gemini. So we can expect some sudden shifts around the information we get in the world, radical shifts, new narratives, unconventional learning. Gemini can be about learning as well. And this can also activate our nervous system a little bit because Uranus in general, if it's strong in your chart, can bring like this energy to who you are, where you have an activated, let's say, sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system, because it does bring like this sense that you're downloading stuff. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's pretty prominent in my chart. And so Uranus can do that. And then in Gemini, because it's this fast sign that's kind of frenetic, if you know anyone who's got like a strong Gemini energy in their chart, like Moon in Gemini, they love to chit chat about everything with everybody. And so you put the energy of Uranus with this fast moving Gemini, and you can see how there might be a little bit of a frenetic quality to this period for all of us, unfolding over the next 7 years until until Uranus moves into Cancer in 2032. And you might get a sense for the meaning of this. You would have gotten a little preview because Uranus was in Gemini for a short period of time last year, from July to November. So if you're somebody who journals, you might go back and think about what that meant for you, and it might have been a preview around what might be unfolding for you in the next few years. And then we are to one of the most beautiful energies of the year, May 18th to June 12th. Venus and Jupiter are both co-present in Cancer. They meet together at 25 degrees of Cancer exactly on June 9th. And why is this so great? Well, these are the two benefic planets, the two most positive planets in the zodiac. Venus is the goddess of love and relationship, excuse me, art and beauty and social justice. She's got, especially when she's in her morning star phase, again, too much information for right now, but when Venus is in her morning star phase, she's the goddess of war, where she leads things, she leads justice, sort of movement kind of energy. So we have Venus, the goddess of love, and how we relate to people, how we receive love from other people in Cancer, which is a water sign that's about protecting family and home and tribe, creating safe space for things to grow and thrive. Think of the summertime, flowers in the garden, tending to those flowers. Think of backyard parties with friends that go late into the night where you're having great, deep conversations and sharing intimacy. And so that's Cancer. And then when we add Jupiter, who has been in Cancer for since last June, uh, Jupiter's a planet of expansion and abundance and optimism, and you can do it. And he is exalted in Cancer. Again, I'll drop a link to my video on the meaning of exaltation. When a planet is exalted in a sign, basically they're held on high like a king. They have special powers. Everybody loves them. And so it's not just that Venus and Jupiter are together in this sign of creating beautiful spaces for conversation and things to grow. It's that they're both doing really well there. So I think this is a great time. And again, I'm probably going to try to schedule something during this time period where I get together with friends and we can really nurture each other. It just feels so beautiful. Oh, and I should say that Mercury's also going to join in the party in the early part of June. So the conversations between people, because Mercury is the god of communications, he's the messenger to the gods. It will enrich our conversations. This is a good time if we're feeling a little bit beat up by some of the earlier transits that feel a little heavy, like that Saturn-Neptune conjunction on February 20th and that Saturn-Mars-Mercury conjunction on April 20th. This might be a good time to get some healing from those moments if they hit you hard. And then on June 29th, Jupiter enters Leo. Jupiter spends about a year in each sign. It's always good to note where Jupiter is falling in your chart in a year, because that house is a house that's going to receive the goodness of Jupiter, a potential for expanding and opening and good rewards coming to you. So, for example, if Jupiter is in your 10th house, if you're a Scorpio rising this year, Jupiter's going to be in your 10th house of career and bring potential for expanding what you're doing out in the world. And so that can be really nice to keep in mind, because when we know the energy is positive for us, um, it's like it allows us to go with the Tao, with the energy of life. We can step in more confidently into that area of our life wherever Jupiter's falling. I should say at the same time that when Jupiter enters Leo, he's going to be opposing Pluto, who's down there in Aquarius at early degrees. So we're going to want to be a little cautious about hubris or overshooting the mark or getting into power struggles with folks, because Pluto, the god of the underworld, can have to do with power. It's in some ways our survival instincts. So we might find ourselves, as we're expanding around whatever house topic Jupiter is falling in, that we might come up against some learning around containing some of that energy. I have here on the left a picture of Icarus falling from the sky. That's the idea of hubris. In the myth of Icarus, there is a young man and father, Daedalus, I believe is the dad's name, are fleeing the Minotaur. And the father, Daedalus, says, makes some wings of wax so they can fly away and escape. But he warns his son Icarus, who's a young man, be careful. Don't fly too close to the sun because these wings will melt. And of course, Icarus is a young man and he's, a little full of himself and excited to be flying. He flies too close to the sun and falls to his death. So that is some of the caution for Jupiter in Leo energy is you might get really exuberant around being the center and around being publicly known and seen. And you might find the opposition from Pluto. You encounter some opposition around that energy. So just being aware of that during this next year and a half year while Jupiter is in Leo is not a bad thing to think about that. So then the next transit to talk about is that Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, which happens on July 4th of all days. I say of all days because that's the United States birthday, and the United States has has Uranus and Mars co-present in Gemini in their birth chart. So this means that the Mars-Uranus conjunction is going to be built into the solar return or birthday chart for the United States. This could have consequences around the potential for conflict or sudden events, accidents, unfolding in the United States as a whole. Again, it might not affect you personally, but I think it's interesting to note that. And we'll talk about that in the next slide in greater detail, but talking about Mars and Uranus in Gemini in general. When Mars and Uranus come together in the sky, it can, as I said earlier, since Uranus is kind of the lightning bolt and Mars is the god of war and sudden movement and impulsive action, when they come together, there's a potential for accidents. Now, again, it might not impact you personally at all. But one example of this is in Frida Kahlo's chart. Frida Kahlo was a very famous artist from Mexico. And when she was around the age of 19, she had a streetcar accident that was really horrific. And she had multiple surgeries over the rest of her life. And much of her artwork is an homage, you could say, to this experience. She was not able to have children because of the effects of the accident, and so on and so forth. Well, in Frida Kahlo's birth chart, Mars and Uranus and the Sun all have contexts or aspects to each other. And on the day that she had her accident when she was around 19, Mars and Uranus and the Sun were in an aspect to each other in the sky. So this is a very poignant example of that Mars-Uranus energy. We could also, because it's in Gemini, this Mars-Uranus connection, we could get sudden announcements. Remember, Gemini is an air sign that's about gathering data and putting it out in the world. And so sudden communication or announcements might be part of the energy of this contact on July 4th. We're going to see that Mars and Uranus also are in a square to each other on December 3rd or 4th, or 3rd to 4th. And so this same energy is going to be in the sky. Of course, over the next 7 years, well, I'm going to scratch that because I don't want to go there. So just thinking about the combination of sort of sudden impulsive action around information is part of what the vibe of this particular transit is. And impulsivity perhaps around how we speak or share information. So being aware of that can be good. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the United States because lots of astrologers are talking about this very significant reality that Mars and Uranus are together or in the same sign in Gemini, which is where they're about to connect by conjunction in the US birth chart. And you see here on July 4th that Mars and Uranus join at 3 degrees of Gemini. And this is important for a few reasons. First, the Uranus cycle, this is going to be the Uranus return of the United States. Every 84 years, Uranus returns to the same spot it was in the US birth chart. And during previous Uranus returns, we had the Revolutionary era, the Civil War era, and World War II. Now, this is historical correlation. I'm not predicting anything around that we're going to have a war, but understanding that the underlying energy of that possibility is there. That there's each of the Uranus returns coincided with major societal disruption, so there might be more of a disruption in the United States. Now, if you live in the United States like me, this is no surprise. We have been split, and there's a splitting happening. Us versus them energy is pervading the energy of the United States right now. This very much fits with Gemini, which is the sign of the twins of light and dark, Castor and Pollux. You might read the Castor Pollux myth. I mean, I'm kind of into mythology to think about that. But the energy of Gemini is trying to resolve conflicting positions. You begin Gemini with the split, you end the Gemini energy with some sort of resolution around the conflict, but it takes a working out of that energy. This is going to happen over the next 7 years while while Uranus is in Gemini. And so, as I said, since this aspect, the conjunction is happening in the United States solar return chart, it means this is a year where some of this energy is going to get played out and is significant. And the conflict energy is going to rise when when Uranus gets activated. So each time Mars moves around the chart and is in a square or an opposition to Gemini or a conjunction, it's going to raise this energy again. Mars takes around 2 years to move around the chart. So we'll have another conjunction of Uranus and Mars in 2 or so years, and then 2 or so years after that. And then I believe one more time before Uranus leaves, and we'll see an unfolding of the meaning of this energy in the United States. So then another really interesting aspect is all the outer planets are going to be at 4 degrees, July 19th to the 23rd. And you can see this in the chart here on the left. We have Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius, sextiling Neptune at 4 degrees Aries, and trining Uranus at 4 degrees Gemini, and opposing Jupiter at 4 degrees Leo. And then you can also see the other planets like Neptune sextiling Uranus and Neptune's trining Jupiter and so on. So we already have the outer planets in air and fire, and then they're all like at this point of whoosh, moving toward each other. It feels like a real acceleration of whatever energy of big shifts of structures and change that's coming with the movement from earth and water into air and fire. This feels like a pivotal moment. Again, this may not impact you personally, although if the outer world is changing, it can't help but impact us on some level, but some people are going to be more impacted than others. You'll have a stronger impact if you have any personal planets or points, the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, at around 4 degrees of air or fire signs. This is a threshold moment where you may have a shift that just shifts your life and where you have a change and going back feels like it's unlikely. It's a time for adapting rather than control. I think of the prophecy of the Hopi elders. I'll drop a link to a blog post if I can. Yeah, I can do that, I think. I did about this where it's been a long time prophecy or advice that has been more recently restated around this moment in time in the universe is a moment when it's best to go with the flow of the energy of what's unfolding. That if you fall into the river of change and you allow yourself to be carried and adapt to that change, you'll suffer less than if you're somebody who's trying to hold on to the shore and stop the change from happening. And so that's the advice. I mean, that's what I'm doing for myself. And I probably have repeated this many times, but knowing that there are these big shifts happening in life, I've really been concentrating on, trying to find ways to support myself, find my center, find what sustains me in the midst of change. Because, life is change. Sometimes we forget that and think that things are always going to stay the same, but it's constantly moving and that the rapidity of the change is accelerating right now. So that's just something to think about. Yeah. And then the next transit is July 26th. We have the nodes of the moon enter Leo and Aquarius. They'll be there for about a year and a half. They've been in Virgo and Pisces. We've been working around letting go around that Virgo energy and moving into trust and faith, that Pisces energy. And now we're being asked to work with wherever Leo and Aquarius fall in our chart, whatever houses those are in, we're going to be perhaps letting go of being the center, that Leo energy of individual importance, and moving toward or embracing collective ideas a little bit. Now, with the nodes, it's not linear. It's not like you go from here to there. It's more like trying to get a balance and find the center between those energies. We may be getting lessons around if we're bigger than life in the Leo part of our chart, maybe tempering that and understanding the need to use our Leo creative capacity to serve the collective, that Aquarius energy. Here I have a picture of Karl Marx. As I mentioned, he wrote the Communist Manifesto and was an Aquarius rising and really exemplifies some of the energy around what Aquarius wants, which is to serve the collective or the greater good over itself. I have to just make a side point that the philosophy or theories of Karl Marx are not the same as how they were implemented in Russia, in the USSR, or in China. He was a philosopher, an idealist. And when human beings take up ideals, sometimes they do them in really horrific ways because they can kind of be stuck in the idea and not be flexible about the needs of human beings. So that's one of the reasons we need to think not just about the collective, but also individuals and how they're impacted, and find a balance between these energies and not go too hard toward one or the other. That's just a side note. Okay, we have three more slides, or this is yeah, so we're nearly there. Now we have the solar eclipse at 20 degrees Leo on August 12th. And as I mentioned earlier, solar eclipses happen when the sun and the moon are conjunct and they're near a node of the moon. And with this eclipse, solar eclipses can have to do with letting go of old ideas, or particularly since this is a south node eclipse, right? It's about a letting go. And so visibility shifts, eclipses coincide with changes in prominence and attention. If we're letting go of being the center, that Leo energy, there might be a moment with this eclipse that you've been shining and everybody's been seeing you, and you got to let go of that, or let go of some of our ideas or ego ideas about what it means to be bigger than life and center stage in the world. It doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, that you're never going to shine anymore. It's that you learn lessons about where the ego maybe has been holding on to that and taking credit for its creativity, or for the creative flow of life that is appearing through you as you shine in the world. To me, all astrological transits provide us this opportunity to learn more about our patterns and restructure them in service of the larger part of who we are, the deeper part of our soul. And yeah, so this might be part of the energy that you go through. This eclipse falls in the third decan of Leo. We can see here on the left that the tarot card, the Seven of Wands, is associated with this decan. I'll drop a link to my video on this part of the zodiac. This is where Donald Trump has his rising degree, is in the third decan of Leo. This part of the zodiac has to do with, the first part of Leo, Leo 1, is this moment when we've entered the fray of life and we're going to try and bring our creativity out in the world. We have to go through some sort of competition to shine in the world. The second decan of Leo is the Six of Wands. It's the moment of victory when we're shining in the world and everybody thinks we're amazing. But the third decan of Leo, the light is beginning to fade. We're moving toward the fall. We're having to let go of the energy of being on top. And so we have other people coming at us, perhaps, and we're trying to defend our territory. So with the South Node here, again, we might just be letting go of or encountering conflicts with other people, even where we need to judge where, if maybe we've been trying to hold on to our territory too hard. You think about that a little bit. So creative authority might be disrupted by this energy. Eclipses always bring disruptions. There are these moments, it's kind of like a reboot of your computer. There are moments when the sun or the moon appear to disappear from the sky. Everything gets dark. It's like a karmic correction. We're going to get you back in line with your soul's purpose if you veered off course. And so that might be part of what this eclipse shows us. And then we look at the lunar eclipse, which is a north node eclipse. North node tends to bring new things into our life, a hunger for new energy in that whatever part of our life the eclipse falls or the transit falls. And here it's Pisces. And so Pisces is a water sign. It's the last of the water signs. As the last of the water signs, it has to do with emotions and connection. All water signs are about our emotions, our body, our connection with the world as a whole. And here, when we get to the last of the water signs, it's about merging with the universe, the great ocean of oneness, deep faith and spirituality. And so this eclipse, if it falls on an inner planet or point for you, may bring some new information, some new experience around connecting with that faith, with the river of life, with compassion, with joy, you could say as well. The 4 degrees of Pisces falls in the first decan of Pisces, and we see here that that is the 8 of Cups, and this deepens the idea of this eclipse being about the spiritual, because if you look at that 8 of Cups card, what we see is a man turning away from 8 full cups behind him, what the material world can offer him as far as sustenance and nurturing, and he's moving up toward the mountain. And that has a connotation of moving toward inner reflection, trying to find the source within instead of the source that we receive of nourishment from the outer world. And so, yeah, I have my Saturn at this degree of Pisces, and I'm in the middle of my second Saturn return. It'll be over by then, but I'm excited to have that Sirius Saturn get some warmth from this lunar eclipse, some possible nourishment, some internal reflection. And then, okay, so this is the last transit that we're going to talk about. I have 2 slides on it because it's one of the bigger ones of the year, and it's particularly focused on relationships, reviewing, digging deep, having deep conversations, maybe people coming back into our life where we've let go in the past, and maybe we're going to repair or work through power struggle issues, complex issues with them. I'll unpack that because it's a lot. So what we have here is that Venus and Mercury are both going to retrograde at the same time. Venus starts her retrograde first. Venus starts her retrograde at 8 degrees Scorpio and goes back into Libra. Mercury starts its retrograde. Oh, I have it in the next slide. It starts its retrograde, I think, around 22 and goes back to maybe 5 Scorpio. So the place where they overlap in their retrograde is the first 10 degrees of Scorpio. So that's more prominent. And Scorpio is a water sign ruled by Mars. It's about connecting with other people, that emotional connection that we get through deep alchemical, you could say, wanting to be really close to someone. Scorpio is a fixed sign, so it can have a quality of wanting to stick with things past the point where maybe they should be let go of, because there's just like, I am going to commit, I am going to be loyal, and I expect you to be loyal as well, as part of the relational energy of Scorpio. Part of what Scorpio learns sometimes is letting go. And some of Scorpio, it can be a sign that has to do with the darkness of life. If you think about Pisces as being the deep water of the vast, or the vast water of the ocean, Scorpio is the deep water of the ocean floor, where it's a little dark down there, where we're looking at things that maybe other people don't want to look at. I'm a Scorpio rising. Scorpio energy can tend to be very psychological and look deeply into other people and want to connect and understand them. And so this time period, if you look at the tarot card there, it's the 5 of Cups that's associated with this first 10 degrees. And that first 10 degrees can have to do with mourning and loss. And sometimes people with energy in this part of their chart, part of what they're learning is that in the midst of loss or death or endings, they need to, or that it's good to understand what still sustains us, that life continues in the midst. We see here in the card a woman, 3 cups, or it could be a man, a figure, where 3 cups have fallen over. And it looks, if you're just looking forward, it looks like all is lost. But if that figure turns around, we see 2 cups remain. There's something that remains that sustains us. We also see a bridge over the river there in the background, showing the connections that are possible in the midst of these grieving moments. And so with Venus, the god of love and relationship, retrograding in this part of the zodiac, you can see where maybe you're gonna, if you've had some losses around relationship at some time, maybe this comes up for you to process, because Scorpio loves to dig deep and process emotions. Can have a hard time letting go, so it can get stuck. So Mercury is also retrograde there. Mercury is our mind, how we think, how we communicate. So the possibility for conversations, revisiting old ideas, and maybe coming to some understanding is built into this as well, because we have the retrograde period where we go back and review and things come up for us to learn from. But then when the planets turn direct is when we can have these moments of clarity. So while it might feel like a bumpy ride during this period where you're digging deep with your emotions and maybe talking with people, it clears up, right? As the energy moves forward, maybe we've learned something as a result of this retrograde periods. Retrograde periods to me are karmic corrections, just like eclipses are. And I say that because when planets move retrograde, they're moving in primary motion, which is the motion of God, according to ancient philosophers. And so there's a way in which usually our life is moved in secondary motion. That's kind of like about the material world in our everyday life. We're just moving forward and everything's going great. But eventually we can get off track and out of line with our soul, and the primary motion moving backwards gives us a time to realign and connect with and wonder about the ways in which we've gone off the path. And so planets, when they move retrograde, are moving in primary motion. And the nodes of the moon always move in primary motion. They move the opposite direction of the planets. So that hence the idea of karma and correcting things coming out of these retrograde periods and out of eclipses. I know that was a lot, but it's something I'm really interested in and have found to be true through my own internal experience. Um, yeah, I think that is good for this slide, and you can always review the additional information on there. Like I said, I'll drop a link to a Dropbox where you can download that. And then um, one last thing to think about, an added emphasis of the importance of this particular retrograde period. First, it's important because retrograde periods always are, especially Venus retrogrades, because they don't happen as often. But then we have both Venus and Mercury together retrograding in the same place. That suggests importance. And then also, right when Venus begins her retrograde, she's going to be in a T square, and Mercury is in a T square as well, to Mars and Pluto, which are in opposition to each other. And a T square, Venus and Mercury at the apex, and we have Mars at the top and Pluto at the bottom. It's this intense energy that tends to push the pressure toward the planet at the apex. So it's almost like we're working through some power complex with someone else because Pluto is about power and Mars is the god of war. When they're opposed to each other, it's like we're having conflict with somebody in our life. And the energy moves toward working through, looking at the past, having conversations, trying to understand in that deep scorpionic way the energy. This suggests also, because it's at the apex, that we could go too far carrying that energy. If we get too dark, if you get too scorpionic heavy, if you get too trauma, again, I'm a Scorpio rising, and that's the energy of Scorpio sometimes. It can get fixed around emotional topics. The resolution to the T square is always in the opposite sign. And so for this particular energy, one of the things you may want to do is move toward ways of nourishing yourself or sourcing yourself that have to do with Taurus. Taurus is another fixed sign, but it's got the opposite energy of Scorpio. Taurus is like the base to Scorpio's acid, if you remember chemistry. Scorpio energy can be really intense and dig in deep and want to go dark. And Taurus is ruled by Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, and it's an earth sign. It likes luxury and comfort and soft, cozy evenings with a pint of ice cream and your teddy bear on the couch, right? That's kind of the Taurus vibe. It likes security and grounding. So anything you can do to ground yourself during this period in your body is really going to help you as you work through some of these issues, or if you do. Again, this will have more impact for certain folks than other folks. It's going to have more impact for you if you have planets or points in the first 10 degrees of Scorpio, or if you're a fixed sign rising, Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo. They could have more impact for you. And so when it comes down to ways to work with the energy, I think massages, somatic experiencing. I'll drop you a link to a woman who teaches some classes on somatic experiencing, this process of connecting with our body in this really deep and easy way. It's slow, it slows us down. And the classes are pretty inexpensive too, which is always nice. So massage, somatic experiencing, gardening, because Taurus loves to garden, right? If you're somebody that enjoys gardening, although it's going to be the fall, depending on where you're at, that might be a little harder, but maybe you get some plants and flowers and throw them around your house to bring in that warm energy. So you can riff on that idea. Anything that's going to get you in your body is going to help weather the intensity of this time period. So wonderful. I mean, if you stayed through this whole thing, thank you so much. This is my joy, creating content for folks. It deepens my own understanding of astrology. I hope it deepens yours. If any of these aspects interested you or hit you, feel free to drop note, and we can have a little chat. And yeah, and if you did enjoy it and stay with me, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And I'll be putting out new videos soon. I'll be doing Capricorn 2 very soon, that Decan video and so on. So you'll get all of that if you subscribe to the channel. So I hope to see you soon. Thanks again.